Introduce myself. I'm Travis English. I am part of the strategic engagement team here at WEC. I appreciate you joining us this morning. As you've probably heard, we've had a couple audio issues, so hopefully you're able to hear us all. We're going to start with WEC's antitrust policy as we do all WEC meetings. All WEC meetings are conducted in accordance with the WEC antitrust policy and the NERC antitrust compliance guidelines. All participants must comply with the policy and guidelines. This meeting is public. Confidential or proprietary information should not be discussed in the open session. This webinar is also being recorded and it will be posted publicly. By participating, give your consent for your name, voice, image, and likeness to be included in that recording. WEC strives to ensure the information presented today is accurate and reflects the views of WEC. However, all interpretations and positions are subject to change. If you have any questions, please contact our legal counsel. With that, Chris Raper is our Vice President of Strategic Engagement and External Affairs here at WEC. She is going to be our moderator, hopefully today, if we're able to get her audio issues taken care of. But let's go ahead and take a look at our panelists and introduce them. And maybe I can give you each a moment to introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about yourselves this morning. So let's start. Crystal Ball is the Executive Director of PNUC, or the Pacific Northwest Utilities Conference Committee. Crystal, can you share a little bit about yourself this morning?
Yes. Good morning, everyone. As Travis said, I am Crystal Ball, and I manage a trade association for electric utilities and industry partners here in the Pacific Northwest. And one of the things that we do here at PNUC is we produce a product. A product is called the Northwest Regional Forecast, and it is a sum of utilities plans, and it's a 10-year outlook of loads and resources. And what we see in the 2025 update to the Northwest Regional Forecast is a significant increase in projected demand for electricity. And we also track how utilities are planning to meet that increasing demand.
Great, Crystal. This is Crystal, I believe, our second time, maybe even third time presenting on this discussion series, second time. So I appreciate you coming back again and sharing with us. Next, let's go to Carolyn Ebner. She's Commercial Services Lead at NWP Williams. Go ahead, Carolyn.
Good morning, I'm Carolyn Ebner. I've spent almost 11 years working for Williams, and the last 5 of those have been supporting Northwest Pipeline from the commercial services side. Thanks for having me on the panel this morning. I'm looking forward to providing a natural gas perspective in today's conversation.
Great. Again, welcome to the call. Appreciate you joining us. Jason Hartzell is the Manager of Fuels and Contracts at Arizona Public Service Company. Jason?
Yeah, good morning, everybody. As mentioned, Jason Hartzell, Manager of Fuels and Contracts. I've been with Arizona Public Service for 12 years and 7 years in my current role. I manage all of our fuels contracts, which includes natural gas, coal, and diesel contracts, and then also manage all of our purchase power, long-term purchase power agreements, which could be wind, solar, biomass, batteries, you name it, any kind of purchase power agreement. So looking forward to the call today and sharing some of Arizona's perspective.
Great, Jason, appreciate you taking the time this morning. And last but not least, Aaron Rodehorst, Manager of Term Trading at Portland General Electric. Aaron.
Thank you, Travis. Good morning. My name is Aaron Rodehorst. I am part of the Power Operations Organization at Portland General Electric, currently managing our term trading function, which largely focuses on power and gas procurement in forward months and prompt in future years. Prior roles have been in real-time and day-ahead trading and operations as well, and so have some direct experience with some of the gas-electric coordination that we'll talk about this morning.
Great, Aaron. Appreciate you joining the call and sharing your perspective. I see that Chris Raper is back on the call, so we're going to see if we can get a quick audio test from you, Chris.
Hey, Travis, can you hear me?
Oh, and I see you. So that's great news. Welcome to the call, Chris Raper.
Thanks, Travis, for doing the intro. Thanks so much to all of our panelists. I apologize. Nothing can frazzle a moderator more than having technical difficulties getting on right before an hour-long conversation. So forgive me. um, so Travis got the intros done. I want to get started on the conversation because I think it's really important and we have a limited amount of time here today. So I'm curious, natural gas and electric interdependencies have always been a thing, right? But they seem to have come to the forefront of the conversation more recently in the last couple of years. And I think anyone in the industry knows that we've had events like Uri and Elliott, and then there was an event in January of 2024 with the gas system that I don't think as many people are aware of. And it seems like some of the new focus on natural gas as the baseload resource, and by that I mean coal's getting retired, other baseload is not as available or dispatchable, and so I can start with anyone. I know Crystal and Carolyn probably had that 30 to 60,000 foot view of this, but what is it right now that makes this such a very important conversation for the industry to understand the interdependencies between natural gas and electric system?
Well, I can give, is my audio still good? Great.
Yes.
Let me touch on that recent example, Martin Luther King Jr. Day weekend in January of 2024. So to set the scene a bit, we had long duration of cold weather in the Pacific Northwest, and it was expected to continue all holiday weekend long. And around noon Pacific time on Saturday, January 13th, 2024, Jackson Prairie Storage Facility completely shut in. So this lost nearly 1.1 BCF of natural gas supply to the region. After about 1 hour of no improvement, Northwest Pipeline recognized the need for immediate help, and we activated the Northwest Mutual Assistance. This group is a tight collection of gas pipelines, LDCs, and power generators in the area. And through these quick discussions, the group was able to communicate and solve for how we were going to offload 1.1 BCF of gas in the region when nearly all parties were experiencing peak gas loads. So fortunately, Jackson Prairie came back online to full operational status about 6.5 hours later. And the emergency mutual assist did its job. We kept gas in homes and we prevented the pipelines from running dry. It did, however, create quite the economic domino effect for our friends on the power side, and I think this conversation will help us step a little bit more into that. So maybe Crystal, I'll hand it over to you at this point.
Can I ask one question, Crystal, before you do a follow-up? And Carolyn, that is, when did this mutual assistance program come into being? Has it been a thing for a while? Is it new and kind of unique to the situation that we're in?
It's been a thing for a while, and events within the last 7-8 years, we've really gotten a chance to practice why this Northwest Mutual group exists. The most recent example being that one from January of last year.
Okay, thanks. Crystal, did you want to follow up?
I do, and I thank Carolyn for setting the stage for what happened. As I mentioned in the opening, I manage a trade association for electric utilities, and so I'll just provide a perspective on that event from the electric side. When we look back at that prolonged cold snap over that holiday weekend, we can see that utilities imported about 5,000 megawatts on average of electricity to meet that demand over that period of time. And so it's, again, the demand for electricity, for energy over that period was great. There was this incident on the gas side, and the electric utilities imported a significant amount of electricity to meet the demand, to keep the electricity flowing and to keep homes heated. Industry leaders recognize the region is dangerously close to not having enough energy. That was an example of a period where this region is dangerously close. And so the industry leaders asked me and also Dan Kirshner at the Northwest Gas Association to bring utilities together and to talk about what happened over that prolonged period of cold weather. And we did that. And these industry leaders identified a few actions that we think that we can take, all centered around improving coordination between the two sectors, between natural gas and electricity. And that's because of what we saw happen over that prolonged period of cold weather that holiday weekend in January 2024.
Okay, so kind of a renewed interest, it sounds like, Crystal, from the electric side of the industry to make sure that they understand what's going on the natural gas side because of the increased reliance on natural gas as that dispatchable baseload. Okay, Aaron and Jason, I'm curious. Oh, yep.
Sorry, Chris, if I could just interject. Thank you for a good summary of my talking points. I think here in the Pacific Northwest, we have so much hydro, right? And so we rely on that hydro system and the flexibility of that hydro system. But this was January, and it was a low water year. And so we recognize that natural gas is the region's second largest power source behind hydro, and these two systems are very interdependent, and we will continue to depend on natural gas. So I wanted to get that one in there. Thanks, Chris, for that interjection.
Of course, yeah. Aaron and Jason, I'm curious, from the utility side of things, we've got Pacific Northwest represented. That as a former Idaho girl and Idaho commissioner, I feel like Pacific Northwest gets a lot of attention in things, particularly because of hydro, as Crystal just brought up. But the Desert Southwest actually behaves differently with regard to the natural gas system, and its reliance, as I understand it, is different. And so, Aaron, I'm curious from your perspective, is your utility pretty well aligned with everything that Carolyn and Crystal are talking about, and how they're beginning to concentrate on what those interdependencies are and how we can align the systems better? And then Jason, to what extent is the Desert Southwest different? Because the Western interconnection is in fact interconnected, and so it relies on all the parts and pieces to behave and serve customers from second to second. Aaron, did you want to address that first?
Sure. Yeah, so in short, I'd say yes, a lot of alignment. I was PGE's representative in this mutual assistance group during the January 2024 event, the mutual assistance group that Carolyn referenced. And when we get into these events where there isn't headroom in our systems, we're fully using our pipelines, we're fully using our transmission systems, there's a high degree of need for coordination when you're in these operational events. And a takeaway that we had from the January event, and one we've been discussing, was how to keep building on that coordination, because when you are needing to make sure that residential customers have both heating and their electric needs, we have to make sure that solving for one doesn't create problems for others. And it becomes more than just PGE as a balancing authority, but we're really talking about the greater footprint. So for example, when I get into contingency event planning at Portland General Electric, I will share really detailed plans with my balancing authority area representatives for PGE's BA, because they will then be coordinating with other BAs, coordinating with RC West, and I will tell them, here's what PGE's portfolio looks like, and as we walk into an event in terms of places that we plan to source power from, the level of firmness of that transmission we expect to use, our fuel supply and the firmness of our transport for that fuel supply. But I only have that view for PGE at that level of detail. And when we find ourselves in these very these contingency events that have a high risk of large consequences when you fail, you have to coordinate outside of just PGE. And that was a big learning with, I think, the January 2024 event, was how tightly we had to coordinate to make sure we didn't create electric problems solving gas problems.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks for that. Jason, can you help us understand from a Desert Southwest perspective how you look at things differently and coordinate differently?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and I appreciate just being on this panel to discuss this event, because it was one that I wasn't really all that aware of leading up to this conversation and preparing for the conversation. But I was able to kind of reflect on it, and I do think that there's different planning perspectives that as I sat down and considered what you guys are all dealing with, that we've taken into account in order to deal with this. So similar to what I've heard in this situation is the pipeline itself is 100% subscribed, and so over the last few years in Arizona, we've been coordinating on options because we're dealing with the similar situation, and we've seen events like Winter Storm Uri, the MLK event, and other things kind of going on around us, and the dependency on the natural gas system to support those events, as Carolyn was just mentioning. We have such intertie to those systems, and the natural gas system in particular is a dispatchable resource that generally responds in a lot of cases on any of these kind of events that we're talking about. So the dependency has been high, and being 100% subscribed, and seeing it actually coming for a while around renewables. So another thing that we've taken into account is looking at renewable volatility in fringe kind of cases to understand our dependency on the natural gas system and what our really peak need is. A big shift that we've seen in Arizona is that with more industry growth and data center growth, you're seeing a shift from a summer peak demand on the pipeline system to a winter peaking demand on the pipeline system. That's new to, kind of Arizona, and you would think it's so hot here during the summer, you have those dependencies, but that is a shift that is occurring. And so what that creates is a peak or new peaks on the gas system for all of us in a constrained environment where you've are maximizing out the system capabilities. And looking at those fringe cases, we've kind of discounted our natural gas electric generation and what we will accredit it for because of the firmness of the pipeline. And so we've taken kind of those, those balances, we try to make those balances. But this year, with the delay in renewables being able to keep up with customer demand, we just recently had to, sign on to a new agreement with Energy Transfer Partners to build a new pipeline from the Permian Basin in West Texas to Arizona. We would be one of the shippers of that pipeline. So we're only one of the Arizona utilities that has, seen this additional need for natural gas, dependency on natural gas in times of these types of conditions. And we now, it's gotten so far, we believe that the most prudent thing to do, we've, looked at the economics of different options, and the most prudent thing to do is expand that natural gas system. So Although we haven't been directly impacted on any generation or reliability events due to generation outages, we want to be proactive in this space and believe it, will enable and continue dispatchable resource capabilities into the future. One other thing that I just mentioned in the differences is we have direct firm natural gas supply contracts with the interstate pipeline companies directly feeding our natural gas generation facilities. And there is no, of all the Arizona owned resources, I'll say, and none of those, or APS owned resources, and none of those have an LDC kind of interim or a priority decrease, let's call it, to, reduce those firm commitments for natural gas when you need it the most. So those are, some of the key differences in how we've gone about planning for natural gas and, both pipeline reliability and our own generation reliability to serve our customers.
Okay, I appreciate that. And I appreciate you pointing out the distinctions. It's interesting because you said you're going to build some more pipeline in Arizona. And it's my understanding, and I have the experts on the call with Crystal and Carolyn, so I'll ask you about this, ladies. But no pipeline in the Pacific Northwest has been expanded for quite a while, as I understand it. And so is there a distinction or a difference? Is it harder to build pipeline in the Pacific Northwest? We all know that the Western interconnection is full of different policy objectives from state to state. And so sometimes anything that's interstate is more difficult than just intra-state. Do you, Carolyn or Crystal, is there a plan to expand pipeline? It feels like as we move towards this new environment that some conversations need to occur with regard to the need for that natural gas as a resource and the growing need at this point with things like data centers, AI, and the build out of the electric system, which, as we're learning, is heavily reliant on the natural gas system.
Absolutely. I can take a shot at it first. So Jason set me up well. For Northwest Pipeline also, we are at our peak design capacity. So during winter periods, during cold weather events, we are at peak capacity, sometimes exceeding peak capacity. We are fully subscribed in our market area. There is no wiggle room for any more demand without adding capital expansions to our system. On a very cold winter day, we are using our system to completely deliver firm. Everybody's firm on a cold day. There's no room for error. And we also rely on our other assets in the area to also show no error. So in a case like the Jackson Prairie incident of January 2024, when there was an emergency situation and gas must be offloaded, how do we make those decisions? From a pipeline perspective, we prioritize keeping heat in homes and also protecting the integrity of the system, the pipeline system itself, so we don't run the pipe dry. And considering our power generators typically have either a backup source of fuel and or an option to purchase power as alternatives, shedding power generation load from our pipeline is a very fast and substantial way to solve for an emergency deficit like this Jackson Prairie example.
Okay, thanks, Carolyn. Chris, I want to add to it for you for a minute. I'm going to make yours more complicated because we're friends. What kind of an impact do you think the increase in large load will have on the need for gas generation? And how might the retirement of natural gas impact gas emergencies in the future? I mean, it sounds like we're trying to expand, but at the same time, we know that there are efforts underway to retire natural gas assets. That's a hard phrase.
Well, I can speak to what we see here in the Pacific Northwest. I think what we are experiencing is that it's just very hard to build any kind of infrastructure here, energy infrastructure. We are struggling to build new generating resources of all types. And we see this as we look back about in our forecast of what utilities were planning to build and what they've actually been able to deploy. So I would just start with it's really hard to build energy infrastructure in this region of the West. As I said in my opening, PNUC produces a product. It's a 10-year outlook of loads and resources, and we see a projected increase in demand of over 30% over 10 years. That's coming from a few drivers, data centers, certainly one of them, large loads, but also we are anticipating increasing demand for electricity from the electrification of things like transportation and heating. And so we do add up what utilities are planning to meet that future demand. And what we see when we add it all up, utilities in this region are planning for about 30 gigawatts of new generating resources. And we see mostly wind, solar, and battery making up the majority of that 30 gigawatts of planned future resources. We don't see a lot of natural gas in that planned future resources. But Chris, what we're trying to share is that the region depends on natural gas. We don't see a whole lot of retirement of the natural gas power plants. When we ask utilities how they are planning to meet their loads, we still see that dependability on the natural gas system. And what we know is that that system is very constrained. And so we need to focus here in this region on building energy infrastructure. That includes electricity infrastructure, transmission, the generation, but also working together on the expansion of the gas system so that we can maintain a reliable system.
Huh. Key to everything, isn't it, Crystal? I mean, I'm supposed to be the one talking about reliability, right? From what perspective, reliability is of paramount importance. And so it may look like we WEC are promoting natural gas as a resource. In fact, I have said it once, if I've said it a million times, WEC is resource neutral, but WEC recognizes the necessity of natural gas on the system in order to maintain reliability. So I appreciate the segue that you provided also. Aaron and Jason, I'm curious, with peak demand changes and some transition of direct use natural gas customers to electric, like Crystal was talking about for electrification, are these transitions of direct use natural gas customers moving to electric being accounted for in load forecasts of the electric utility?
So Chris, I won't probably be able to speak to the very specific details of that since I can't wear my I'm not the integrated resource planning hat. But I can emphasize the point around reliability metrics and how we see an increased need for this cross-sector collaboration to really think about the reliability metrics and talk about these types of questions across the two sectors. An example I'd want to go back to would be Carolyn's point of, from a gas view, if you have a situation where you need to maintain the system, a power load, power consuming gas is a very effective way to maintain the gas system. That is important, I think, for our planners to hear, to make sure that they then fully appreciate that in their planning metrics, particularly reliability metrics. It's an item that I try to share internally, that type of example, as well as like the concerns I have around these prolonged events, to make sure that our reliability metrics are robust for that as well. But I do think your original question and these examples I brought it back to, they all emphasize that this cross-sector platform or forums where we get to discuss the robustness of reliability metrics is an important item to keep front of mind.
Yeah, I'll just
Jason.
go ahead and, sorry. So yeah, giving a little bit of maybe Arizona history here to get us started. We in Arizona, to meet peak demand, we've hit a new all-time peak the last 3 years in a row because of new customers coming in and customer growth. And I'd say we are including things like electrification in our load forecasts, but aren't all that meaningful to the overall load, although I'm not also in the resource planning department in particular, but I think that's a small amount of load growth in comparison to what we're expecting from data centers and industrial growth, from electric utility standpoint. And so in 2025, for example, we hit our about 8,500 megawatts in APS, our peak demand, a little bit over that. And by 2038, we're expecting that to be 13,000 megawatts. So we're essentially, 5,000 megawatts, almost doubling the size of our system in about 13 years, whereas it took us 140 years to get to where we're at now. That is the growth that we're dealing with. The amount of new resources that we have to add in somewhat of a short period of time to meet this kind of peak demand. And that doesn't even include additional data centers that we haven't even said yes to, that aren't even included in the load forecast numbers that I just kind of referenced. And so we don't see another way around it. We need to expand natural gas. That's why we've committed to, kind of building a new pipeline, which was the first piece in our mind to enabling, that expansion, either using existing resources more or, investing in new gas resources. Other utilities in this state, for example, have announced converting their coal units to natural gas burning. So that's going to only increase demand on the natural gas system. We've got LNG demand in Mexico that's also growing, that flows through the Arizona gas systems. So, all of those components really are putting the stress on that system. But, we've also got the Permian Basin that we're looking to expand to, which has robust growth in and of itself, low prices. So believe that, will be a sustainable long-term kind of investment for us.
So speaking of investments, and Jason, you having just called them long-term investments, which we know they are, right? Natural gas resources are generally amortized over 30, 40, 50 years, depending on the system that's being built. How do we engage with the current mindset and or recent past mindset that natural gas was the next resource to be retired, right? Because of carbon emissions. There's some kind of dichotomy there that exists for what the dialogue has been and what the system needs to maintain reliability going into the future. Is there a dialogue that is being engaged in now, or are we part of it, right? And the momentum of the moment to make sure that people have the right information to make the right decisions. And I'm thinking in terms of policymakers. It would seem, Jason, that in Arizona, with the conversations that I've had, your Arizona commissioners are pretty well informed and understand the need for natural gas for reliability for the customers in the desert Southwest. I'm not sure about the way that the other commissioners within the Mountain West and Northwest are coalescing around the idea of needing additional resources, not just utilizing natural gas for longer, but needing additional natural gas resources. So is there like, what can we highlight for policymakers, because they're the ones ultimately who are deciding on what the utilities can recover in costs from their customers. How do we engage those people who have had a particular mindset for a period of time, and we need to help them to understand and meet the moment? Crystal, I know that you have a lot of thoughts on this, and you guys just engaged in a study with the Northwest Gas Association. You want to be the first to go on this one?
I would love to. Thank you. And I briefly mentioned it earlier when we experienced this January 2024 event, and we were feeling that this region is dangerously close to having an energy supply shortage. Industry leaders came together and we identified a few actions that we could take. Chris, one of those actions was hiring an independent consultant, so outside of us, to review regional reports. That review included WEC's assessment of resource adequacy, included some of the retrospectives on that January 2024 event, and they identified gaps and made some recommendations for how we can do better gas electric coordination, including working together to think about integrated planning. That's a thing that I don't know that much about, and I'm not sure there are really great examples across the country of where that happens. And I think that's one of the reasons why we hear about gas electric interdependency and the need for better coordination. One of the other things that we are trying to do in this region is build awareness about these reliability risks with policymakers and others. And we are having a regional energy symposium in October. And the purpose of that symposium is to increase the understanding about these reliability risks and the planning challenges facing our region. It's to identify barriers to making progress, and is really around building consensus for how we maintain reliability in this region. So again, that is a way for us here in the region to build awareness. We are hosting the Northwest Gas Association, PNUC, Western Power Pool, and the Public Generating Pool, all of us hosting this regional energy symposium on October 10th. I said 10th, but I meant 9th, October 9th in Portland, really trying to get policymakers, utility leaders together to talk about these increasing reliability risks and what we can do about it.
That's funny, because I was going to help you promote that at the end of this conversation today. And I was looking at my paper going, I have it written as October 9th. And I think that Travis put a link in the chat. So we'll make sure that they know the correct day.
Thank you. So, October 9th.
Yeah. It feels like, when we have these moments within the industry of things that really call everyone's attention, like I think data centers has done, right? And the just exponential need for energy in order to supply these data centers. And it gets even bigger than that. But we're not going to get into the details of this today, but the additional component of data centers and AI, I heard a retired Rear Admiral speak. Crystal, I think you were at the same event, the Western Energy. It was hosted by News Data in Boise, and the Rear Admiral said it's not just about giving people the ability to utilize AI in data centers and growth and whatever, and it's about geopolitical things, right? We're battling against other countries that are not necessarily our friends to get to. It's like the arms race, right? On the AI front, to make sure that we don't fall behind in those ways. And so to me, hearing that Rear Admiral speak put a whole different view of this data center, this need to meet the electric requirements of the data center AI revolution, right? It's not just about people wanting to Google things and use Chat GPT to write their college papers, right? There really is a geopolitical component to us being able to serve that load to advance those interests. So that's a whole nother conversation for another day, but just to sort of put a fine point on this isn't just about people plugging in their electronics and wanting to make sure that they can charge them whenever they want to charge them. So are we, as a general question, are we leaving anyone out, right? We're trying to get people's attention, and it definitely will take policymakers. I think we feel like the utilities themselves are engaged and wanting to have the conversation. Do we feel like the utilities are up to speed on where they need to be in order to have a conversation with policymakers to get them up to speed as well? And are we missing any key components of the vast array of stakeholders, right, that we have within this industry, 2 industries now, right, that we need to put a finer focus on in order to make sure that everybody's included?
I'll jump in on this one. One subject I wanted to make sure we talked about for a few minutes here, particularly given, I think, the audience we have, is we've talked a lot about the kind of the emergency conditions, what we do when we're in the emergency. We've been talking about planning and how we would get, additional forums and collect groups to share the stories we're sharing, to then also start thinking about how we would adjust in our planning world. There is another world that, in my view, is, I think of it as like the operational preparation before you get into these events. And at least for Portland General Electric, and I would imagine that is this for other utilities as well, I work very closely with my balancing authority, as I mentioned prior, to make sure they know everything I know, that they can then also be coordinating with their peers. And there are 2 items that I know they shared with me that they have found very helpful, and I think they're areas to look at, say they're successful, can we make them even more successful as we continue to try to manage in this coordinate this world of needing to manage our operations while we get to that new world that we planned for. And that is, there's an RC West working group that I know PG participates in, that stages calls prior to these contingency events when we're planning, and then the summer and winter assessments. And both of those, I think, are very helpful and places to take a closer look at as to why they're helpful and whether we can expand on them to even be more helpful. And to just give a really quick example, what I mean by that is, I've been building a contingency plan at Portland General Electric for 4 or 5 years now, and every year it gets better. And it gets better also when I start to share it more broadly and get to think about what pieces am I not putting into that plan. I think though that group probably has some lessons learned there that also is an area that I'd encourage groups to seek to learn more about, because the more you've thought about the event before you start it, the quicker you can react should you get into conditions we're trying to avoid.
So can anyone participate in those, Aaron, or how broad is the listening audience?
I believe that would be the balancing authority area side within the ARS reliability coordinator. But I do think that they become a key part of this as well when we are trying to manage across the 2 sectors during an event.
Okay. Jason, you look like you had something to add.
Yeah, I just would maybe highlight a couple of things that I thought we've been doing pretty well in the policy space that have helped. I think it got us to a positive recent discussion with our commissioners on their support for natural gas expansion, but it actually happened a lot before that. So we have what we call Resource Planning Action Committee, where it's a public forum for APS to discuss with many different public interests what our plans are for future resources and to give input into that, but also to talk about some of the reliability challenges that you see for different resources types and where they may not be filling gaps in those types of sharing those lessons learned and stress testing those. So I thought that that's been helpful on, building a new pipeline. We had a Arizona utility, we'll call it coalition, both LDCs and electric utilities and the pipelines that would come together to propose different projects. What solutions are those projects solving for? And is it meeting our collective need? And during the stressful times of year, I thought that that was a very helpful collaborative, because you're talking about what your future resources look like or what gaps you have. Really assessing and diving in on the capacity of the pipeline. Is there any turn back from people? Or is there any opportunities for optimization? We had to meet, we met with California companies and Mexico companies and different marketers to all understand where is the capacity and who needs it during the different times of year. So I thought all those pieces were important to ultimately getting on the decision that we did. So just wanted to reference that.
Well, thank you for that. And Carolyn, I'm curious, is there an opportunity, or are you already taking it, as Williams Northwest Pipeline looks to expand capacity, add type to help serve largely the electric load? Are there opportunities for the two industries to coordinate, to build the right infrastructure in the right places, and also to maybe gain some momentum as you're looking at permitting and all of the processes you have to go through to get pipe in the ground?
Absolutely. Yes, we are working together. From our gas pipeline perspective, we work very well and regularly with our electricity partners. Our business development team is constantly in communication with our customers about expansion projects. And moving forward, continuing and enhancing our coordination, as we've said, with all stakeholders is going to be critical.
Oh dear, Carolyn froze.
Going to be crucial. And some of the avenues, like what Crystal's brought up already in some of those platforms, are perfect opportunities to have those group conversations outside of the more confidential one-on-one conversations.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, everybody knows those confidential conversations need to occur, and there are proprietary things that are discussed, but definitely the more open we can be about the conversation, I think the more productive it will be. So anyone who's ever been on a panel that I moderate knows that I often end with one last question. And so here's my last question for each of you. It is, if you had one piece of advice that you could provide to people. So the people who log into this discussion series each month are largely policymakers, but also increasingly utility people, operations, and the like. If you could provide one piece of advice to them on where you would like them to focus with regard to this natural gas electric interdependency, what is the one thing that you would have them focus on right now in this moment that would assist in moving the ball forward for what we all want, which I'm gonna put out there as the WEC person on the call, is reliability for the grid moving forward. So I'll start with Aaron.
I have to be held to one. Okay. I would promote the symposium and the continued learning of that interdependency, because I do think that the discussion around reliability metrics, particularly in that type of symposium and planning forum, is very important. So that would be the one that I would pick and emphasize.
Okay, Crystal, if you can't pick the symposium because Aaron just picked it.
Well, thank you, Aaron. And I would say the Pacific Northwest region is dangerously close to experiencing an energy supply shortage. And so we need policymakers, regulators, utilities to understand that situation. And Chris, that's outside of this projected increase in demand from data centers. There's evidence that demand in our region is growing, but right now, this region is dangerously close to an energy supply shortage. And so I think that my advice to policymakers and other stakeholders is to learn about what these reliability risks are and to come together to think about how the region can maintain reliability. It's very important. And natural gas is critical to this region. It's the second largest source of power in our region, and this gas electric interdependence demands greater awareness.
Thanks, Crystal. Carolyn.
Great. So my final thought would be to share that gas is a clean and reliable source of energy. It's clean and reliable all year long, and it's clean and reliable during cold weather events, especially when those are the same times when renewable energy is less reliable or just not available. And as Crystal said, we are dangerously close to a crisis. I've said earlier in this call, our system is fully subscribed. We have no more wiggle room. And Northwest Pipeline is not unique in that the other pipelines also in the Pacific Northwest, we have no more wiggle room. So Northwest Pipeline is going to continue to have those conversations, both confidential and in these group platforms. We're going to continue to prepare options for growth and additional storage on our gas system.
Thanks. And Jason, I'm curious if the Southwest has some different positions on where the focus might be right now.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. We definitely do. One thing that we do not have in the desert Southwest is gas storage. So we are, I mentioned we've not had, a reliability event, but we've been completely dependent on interstate pipelines all the way from New Mexico, northern New Mexico, and West Texas to Arizona to serve our reliability gas needs. We have gas storage capabilities in West Texas, but unless you have something local, it's not all that dispatchable or responsive to renewable events. And so, I guess my takeaway or my recommendation kind of coming out of this is to analyze those fringe case scenarios and your dependency, whether you're an electric system or natural gas system, and your impacts in these events, and then communicate them with one another. Mentioned looking at and constraining our electric system and going back to the gas company to say, hey, in a worst case scenario, we may use X to serve customers reliably. What would that do to you? Those types of discussions. And I think through that collaboration, and expanding that, not kind of siloing it to a single utility, but I think it's dependent on anyone that's using the natural gas systems that you're dependent on. And so, make that an expansive discussion. It may look something like integrated resource planning, but I think that there's ways to make it less complicated, but to also achieve some of the same results in the end. So,
yeah, I appreciate that perspective, Jason. There are so many differences in the way that the systems are planned and operated, and so it's not like we can align the systems to function the same, but there are ways that if we keep talking to one another, that we can make sure that we are planning for contingencies with each other, as opposed to just operating in the silo that that need to serve customers at every moment has to expand to the consideration of what is available within the system to be able to serve those customers. So I wanted to promote both Crystal's symposium on October 9th. But before that, WEC has a board meeting in the middle of September, and on September 18th, we actually have an interactive session that myself, Brandon Sudduth, and Gary Venz from Carolyn's portion of the world are going to facilitate a dialogue with board members and stakeholders about the natural gas electric interdependencies. And so we're hoping that people will be available and log on for that, participate in that discussion. That's not a panel discussion. It's just a broader conversation with our stakeholders, specifically about maybe where WEC can assist. We're always happy to help facilitate the dialogue like here, also with the symposium. And this is going to be really important for reliability into the future. And as we all know, these types of generation are not built overnight. And so it's a critical dialogue that we need to engage in now in order to have the resources that we need moving into the future. So the WEC board interactive session is September 18th. The Regional Energy Symposium with Northwest Gas Association and PNUC is on October 9th. And I think that'll be a great event to continue these conversations. And I want to thank Carolyn, Crystal, Erin, Jason. You guys are terrific. I think you're specialists in the industry. We want to help continue the dialogue as much as we can, but we really appreciate your expertise in helping to educate the people who dial into this discussion series. I think that this is a great foundational setting for these conversations as they move forward. So Jason, particularly, I want to make sure that we don't forget that there's a desert Southwest that does things a little bit differently. And it's really important that you guys have reliable systems too. So love the Pacific Northwest. And I think sometimes we get engaged in a dialogue that separates the system again, which it is not. It is interconnected. And so it's very important that we all be talking to one another and kind of synergizing opportunities for discussion when they present themselves. So thank you very much for getting on the call. I'm going to let Travis wrap us up for the afternoon, and I hope you all have a terrific week.
Great. I'll echo that gratitude for all of the panelists for coming on and sharing your varying perspectives, and just appreciate you joining us. And Chris, I'm thankful you were able to join and moderate this morning. So, and to the audience members, we appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedules. I did put a link in the chat for everyone for the board of directors interactive session that will be happening here at WEC on September 18th. And then, as we've heard, that Regional Energy Symposium on October 9th. Something to note here in the month of October for the WEC Reliability in the West discussion series, we will not be hosting our discussion series because it's running up against the CRIPSI YRAB meetings that will be happening. So we have canceled for the month. We'll return back on November 5th at 11 a.m. Mountain Time. So with that, I want to again say thank you for joining us, and have a great afternoon, everyone.
Thank you.